The ache was a familiar tenant in Clara's chest, a resident so long-standing it had stopped paying rent and simply existed, a dull, constant pressure beneath her ribs. It had been 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days since she had realized she was irrevocably in love with her best friend, Maya. The count was a secret rosary she prayed on every night, each day a new bead added to the string of her silent devotion. Her life had become a masterclass in sublimation, a performance of platonic affection so convincing that she sometimes fooled even herself. She was the supportive friend, the steadfast confidant, the keeper of secrets. And Maya's biggest secret, the one she unknowingly shared with Clara every day, was how deeply unfulfilling her relationship with Mark was. Tonight was no different. They were curled on opposite ends of their worn, gray sofa, a bowl of half-eaten popcorn between them. The blue light of a mindless action movie flickered across their faces, but the real drama was unfolding in the quiet space they shared. Maya sighed, a sound heavy enough to sink ships, and shifted, tucking her bare feet further under the plush blanket. "He just doesn't get it," Maya murmured, her voice a thread of sound woven into the movie's explosive soundtrack. She did not need to specify who he was. It was always Mark. Mark, the architect with kind eyes and a laugh that never quite reached them. Mark, the man who was, by all accounts, a perfect boyfriend. Except he was not. Not for Maya. Clara's heart performed its usual treacherous gymnastics, a painful clench of empathy for Maya, followed by a sharp, shameful spike of hope. She muted the television, the sudden silence in the apartment feeling both vast and intimate. "What doesn't he get this time?" she asked, her voice carefully modulated to sound like nothing more than a concerned friend. It was a tone she had perfected, a careful blend of warmth and neutrality that betrayed none of the hurricane raging inside her. Maya picked at a loose thread on the blanket. "Everything. We were talking about the future. You know, that big, scary thing. And I was trying to explain how I feel, like I'm standing on the edge of something, but I don't know what it is. I want to travel, maybe go back to school for art history, maybe just. I don't know. Be different." Her gaze drifted towards the window, to the distant, glittering lights of the city. And he just nodded and said, "That's nice, babe. We can definitely fit a trip to Italy in before the wedding." The word wedding was a physical blow. Clara felt the air leave her lungs, the familiar ache in her chest sharpening to a knife's edge. She forced a breath. She had to say something. She was the supportive friend. That was her role. "He's just trying to be reassuring," she offered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "He sees a future with you." "That's a good thing, isn't it?" "Is it?" Maya turned to look at her then, and the raw confusion in her hazel eyes was so profound it stole Clara's breath all over again. Flecks of gold and green swirled in their depths, a galaxy of uncertainty. "Is it a good thing if his future for me feels like a cage?" "A really nice, well-decorated cage with a trip to Italy, but still a cage," she shook her head, a cascade of dark, wavy hair falling over her shoulder. "He doesn't listen. Not really. He hears the words I say, but he doesn't hear me." And there it was. The core of it. The thing that Clara provided without a second thought. She saw Maya. She heard her. She understood the unspoken symphonies of her moods, the subtle shifts in her tone, the language of her silences. Clara knew that Maya's favorite color was not the bright yellow she told everyone, but the soft, dusky gray of a stormy sky. She knew Maya hated the smell of lavender, but loved the scent of old books and rain on hot pavement. She knew that Maya's confident, charismatic exterior was a carefully constructed fortress around a heart that was tender and wild and a little bit lost. Mark knew none of these things. He bought her yellow roses and lavender bath bombs. He saw the fortress and admired its strength, never wondering what it was built to protect. "Maybe you just need to explain it to him differently," Clara said, her voice softer than she intended. The lie felt heavy on her tongue. The truth was, she did not want Maya to explain it to him. She wanted Maya to see that the person she was trying to explain herself to was sitting right here, on this couch, her heart breaking in time with Maya's own. Maya gave a small, humorless laugh. "I've tried. It's like we're speaking different languages." He speaks in blueprints and 5-year plans. I speak in, I don't know, feelings and colors. And maybe she finally looked directly at Clara, her expression softening into something warm and familiar. You always understand. You don't even have to try. The ache in Clara's chest pulsed, a painful, bittersweet throb. This was the crux of her torment and her joy. Being Maya's safe harbor was the greatest privilege of her life, and also the source of her deepest sorrow. She was the one who understood, the one who saw, the one who listened. She was the perfect best friend. And that, she feared, was all she would ever be. She pulled the blanket a little higher over her own legs, a flimsy shield against the cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Of course I do, she whispered. That's what I'm here for, to be the ghost in her own love story, a silent observer watching the woman she loved try to build a life with someone else. It was a miserable existence, but the thought of an existence without Maya in it at all was infinitely worse. So she stayed, and she listened, and she collected the broken pieces of Maya's heart, carefully storing them away, never daring to admit that she believed they fit perfectly with her own. The movie remained forgotten, its muted explosions painting the walls in silent flashes of orange and blue. The real world, contained entirely on their small gray sofa, was far more compelling. Maya seemed to deflate, the tension leaving her shoulders as she sank deeper into the cushions. The apartment they shared was a sanctuary, a small 2-bedroom haven that felt more like home to Clara than any place she had ever lived. It was filled with the evidence of their shared lives, Clara's precariously stacked books on art theory, Maya's half-finished canvases leaning against the walls, 2 mismatched coffee mugs in the sink, a testament to their morning routine. It was a life they had built together, a domesticity so comfortable and seamless that it was easy to pretend it was something more. Clara watched Maya, whose eyes were now closed, her long lashes dark against her skin. She looked exhausted, worn down by the effort of being someone she was not. It was a familiar look, one Clara had seen with increasing frequency over the past year. Maya was a vibrant force of nature, a whirlwind of passion and creativity, but her relationship with Mark seemed to be slowly dimming her light, sanding down her interesting edges until she was smooth and predictable and unhappy. An insidious thought crept into Clara's mind, as it often did in these quiet moments. She would be happy with me. The thought was both a comfort and a torture. Clara imagined a life where she was the one Maya came home to, not just as a roommate, but as a partner. She imagined waking up to Maya's messy hair and sleepy smile, making her coffee just the way she liked it, a splash of oat milk, a dash of cinnamon. She imagined weekends spent exploring art galleries, not sitting through stuffy brunches with Mark's colleagues. She imagined a life filled with color and laughter and understanding, a life where Maya never had to explain the language of her soul, because Clara already spoke it fluently. She quickly banished the thought, guilt washing over her. It felt like a betrayal. Maya was her best friend, and she was in pain. Clara's role was to help, not to fantasize about profiting from her misery. She was supposed to give objective, supportive advice. She was supposed to help Maya fix her relationship, not secretly wish for its demise. The situational irony was a bitter pill she swallowed daily. The person Maya trusted most for relationship advice was the one person who desperately wanted that relationship to fail. Maybe you guys just need a break, Clara suggested, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. Some space to figure out what you both really want. Maya's eyes fluttered open. I suggested that. He panicked. Started talking about couples counseling. As if a stranger could translate for us, she sighed again, a sound of pure weariness. I'm just so tired, Clara. Tired of trying to fit into the box he's built for me. Without thinking, Clara reached across the space between them, her hand covering Maya's on the blanket. It was a simple gesture, one they had shared 1,000 times before. But tonight, it felt different. A current, low and electric, seemed to pass between them. Clara's breath hitched. She could feel the warmth of Maya's skin through the soft fabric, the delicate bones of her hand. Her own palm tingled, 1,000 nerve endings coming alive at once. Maya did not pull away. Instead, she turned her hand over, her fingers lacing through Clara's. The contact was sudden, solid, and terrifyingly real. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet room. This was new. They held hands sometimes, a casual, friendly gesture. But this felt intentional, grounded. Maya's thumb began to trace slow, absent-minded circles over the back of Clara's hand. The simple, repetitive motion was undoing her. Each circle was a spark, igniting a fire that spread up Clara's arm and settled deep in her core. She stared at their joined hands, at the way Maya's slightly longer fingers fit so perfectly with her own. The world seemed to shrink until it contained only this single point of contact. The muted explosions on the television, the distant city sounds, the very air in the room, it all faded away. There was only the warmth of Maya's hand, the gentle pressure of her thumb, and the roaring in Clara's ears. She had to say something to break the spell before she shattered completely. But her throat was tight, her mind blank. What could she possibly say? Your touch is setting me on fire? I've dreamt of this moment for 861 nights? Please don't ever let go. Maya was the one who spoke, her voice a low murmur that seemed to vibrate through their connected hands. What would I do without you? It was not a rhetorical question. It was filled with a genuine, frightening vulnerability. Clara forced her gaze up from their hands to Maya's face. The confusion was still there, but it was joined by something else. Something softer. Something that looked dangerously like reliance, like desperation, like love. But what kind of love? That was the question that haunted Clara's every waking moment. Was it the fierce, loyal love of a best friend? Or could it possibly be, the seed of something more? She squeezed Maya's hand, a small, reassuring pressure that cost her more effort than lifting a car. You'll never have to find out, she promised. And she meant it. No matter how much it hurt, she would never leave. She would stay right here, on this couch, holding Maya's hand, and pretending it did not mean everything. She would be the constant in Maya's chaotic world, the anchor in her storm. Even if it meant she had to drown a little herself every single day. The stasis was painful, but it was a known pain. The alternative, a world without Maya, was an abyss she refused to contemplate. The catalyst arrived not with a bang, but with a laugh. It was a Tuesday night, a few weeks after the conversation on the couch. The tension with Mark had simmered into a low, unhappy boil. Maya was spending more and more time at home, her excuses for avoiding him becoming increasingly elaborate. They had fallen into a new routine, one that felt both wonderful and perilous to Clara. They cooked dinner together most nights, their movements in the small kitchen a familiar dance. They watched old movies, Maya's head often finding its way to Clara's shoulder, her hand habitually seeking out Clara's. The casual touches had become less casual, more of a constant, humming current between them. Clara was living in a state of suspended animation, terrified to breathe too deeply for fear of breaking the fragile, beautiful bubble they had created. They were watching a classic romantic comedy, one they had both seen a dozen times. On the screen, the two leads, a man and a woman who had spent the entire movie as bickering best friends, were finally realizing their feelings for each other. A side character, observing their newfound affection, quipped, "Well, it's about time. Everyone thought you two were dating anyway." Maya let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a genuine sound, full of amusement. "God, that's so us," she said, nudging Clara with her elbow. "Remember Mrs. Gable from downstairs? She asked me last week if you were my partner because we're always carrying groceries in together." She laughed again, a light, airy sound that felt like a punch to Clara's stomach. "I told her, no, she's just my roommate." The look on her face was priceless. "Can you imagine? Us? Dating?" The words sliced through Clara, clean and deep. "Can you imagine?" Clara imagined it every second of every day. It was the entire landscape of her inner world. The ease with which Maya dismissed it, the casual amusement in her tone, confirmed Clara's deepest fears. It was all in her head. The hand-holding, the lingering looks, the shared intimacy, it meant something to Clara because she wanted it to. To Maya, it was just friendship. Deep, profound friendship, but nothing more. The ache in her chest, which had been a dull throb for weeks, flared into a searing agony. She forced a smile, a brittle thing she was sure would crack her face in two. Yeah, she managed, her voice sounding thin and distant to her own ears. Hilarious. Maya, oblivious to the devastation she had just wrought, simply grinned and turned her attention back to the movie, popping a piece of popcorn into her mouth. But for Clara, the bubble had burst. The fragile hope she had been nurturing withered and died. The air suddenly felt thick and hard to breathe. She was a fool. A classic, tragic fool, pining after her straight best friend. The story was as old as time, and she was just another cliché. She mumbled something about needing to get some water and escaped to the kitchen, her legs unsteady. She leaned against the counter, gripping the cool laminate edge until her knuckles turned white. She splashed some cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the dark window above the sink. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, her eyes wide with a pain that felt ancient and bottomless. She had to get over this. She had to build higher walls, lock her heart away somewhere Maya could never accidentally stumble upon it and laugh. When she returned to the living room, the movie's credits were rolling, casting a soft glow. Maya had muted the sound again. She was sitting forward, her elbows on her knees, staring at the blank screen. The amused, light-hearted energy was gone, replaced by a strange stillness. "Hey," Clara said, her voice still shaky. "You okay?" Maya did not look up. She just nodded slowly. A long, tense silence stretched between them. Clara sat down on the far end of the couch, maintaining a careful distance. The space felt like a chasm. Finally, Maya spoke, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "That was a weird thing for me to say." Clara's heart stuttered. "What was?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "The dating thing," Maya said, still not looking at her. Laughing about it. "It just came out. Like a defense mechanism or something." Clara remained silent, her entire body rigid with a new, terrifying kind of hope. It was a phoenix, rising from the ashes of her despair from only moments before. It was a foolish, reckless thing, this hope. Maya finally turned her head, and her eyes met Clara's across the couch. The playful amusement was gone. In its place was an expression Clara had never seen before on her friend's face. It was a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and an unnerving, raw intensity. The air crackled. The world tilted on its axis. But what if we did? The question was not loud. It was barely a breath. But it landed in the silent apartment with the force of a sonic boom. It echoed in the space between them, dismantling every assumption, every wall, every carefully constructed boundary Clara had built for her own survival. But what if we did? Clara could not breathe. She could not think. She could only stare at Maya, whose gaze was unwavering, her hazel eyes searching Clara's for an answer to a question she probably did not even understand she was asking. It was not a joke anymore. It was not a hypothetical. It was a door, creaking open into a room Clara had only ever dreamed of entering. And she was terrified. Terrified to step through it, and even more terrified not to. The stasis had been broken. The world as she knew it had ended in the space of a single, whispered question. Clara's mind was a maelstrom. The question hung between them, a tangible thing, shimmering with possibility and peril. For a long moment, she could not find her voice. It was trapped somewhere in her throat, strangled by years of unspoken feelings. She felt like a diver who had been holding her breath for an eternity, and now, with the surface in sight, she was afraid to exhale. "What do you mean?" she finally managed to ask, her voice a reedy whisper. It was a weak, cowardly response, a plea for clarification she both craved and dreaded. She wanted Maya to say it was just a strange thought, a fleeting whim, and simultaneously, she wanted her to elaborate, to unpack the universe contained within those 5 words. Maya's gaze didn't falter. She seemed to be thinking, truly considering her own question for the first time. "I don't know," she admitted, her honesty a fresh wound. When I laughed, it felt wrong. It felt like I was lying. like I was laughing at something that isn't actually funny at all. She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture of distraction that did nothing to hide the tremor in her fingers. We do everything together. We live together. We know everything about each other. Mrs. Gable isn't crazy for thinking what she thinks. We function like a couple. More than Mark and I ever have. The comparison to Mark was a jolt to Clara's system. This was not just about their friendship anymore. It was about the stark contrast between what Maya had with him and what she had with her. The world began to slowly, terrifyingly, reform around this new center of gravity. That's just because we're best friends, Maya, Clara said, the words feeling like a betrayal of her own heart. She was offering Maya an escape route, a way back to the safety of their old dynamic. Part of her, the terrified, self-preservationist part, was desperate for her to take it. But Maya shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. Is it? Is that all it is? She leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between them by a few inches. The chasm was shrinking. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm playing a part. The supportive girlfriend. The future wife. I say the right lines, I make the right gestures, but none of it feels real. It's like I'm watching my life from the outside. Her voice dropped even lower, becoming conspiratorial, intimate. But when I'm here with you, on this couch, it's the only time I feel real. It's the only time I feel like myself. Each word was a careful footstep into the uncharted territory that had just opened up between them. Clara felt her own carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble, brick by dusty brick. The conversation she had been dreaming of and dreading in equal measure was happening. Right now. What are you asking, Maya? Clara asked, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. She needed to know. She needed to hear the words, no matter how much they might break her. Maya looked down at her own hands, then back up at Clara. The intensity in her eyes was startling. I'm asking, what is this? Between us? Is this friendship? Or have we just been calling it that because it's the only word we know? She took a breath, a shaky, uncertain thing. Lately, I've been thinking about things. About connection. About what it really means to love someone. Not the idea of them, not the future they represent, but the person. The actual person right in front of you. Clara's heart was a frantic bird, beating its wings against the cage of her ribs. This was it. The escalation. The series of charged, late-night conversations she had only ever dared to imagine. Over the next few weeks, their apartment became a crucible. The question, but what if we did, was never spoken aloud again, but it was a constant, silent presence. It lingered in the space between their hands when they brushed in the kitchen. It hummed in the air during their late-night talks. It echoed in the prolonged glances they exchanged over dinner. The world outside their front door seemed to fade into insignificance. Mark became a ghost, a name mentioned in passing, his calls to Maya growing less frequent until they stopped altogether. He was a problem for another day, a loose end Maya seemed content to leave untied for now. Their conversations deepened, veering into territory they had never explored. One night, curled up on the sofa under their shared blanket, Maya turned to her, her expression serious under the warm glow of the lamp. Do you think it's possible to love someone without realizing it? She asked, her voice soft. Clara, whose entire existence was a testament to that very possibility, felt a wry, painful smile touch her lips. I think it's possible to know it so deeply that you convince yourself you don't, she answered, her voice thick with unspoken meaning. Sometimes it's easier to pretend you don't see what's right in front of you. Maya seemed to ponder this, her gaze distant. I feel like my whole life has been a performance. I did what was expected. Dated the captain of the football team in high school. Went to a good college. Got a sensible boyfriend. It's like I've been following a script someone else wrote for me. She looked at Clara, her eyes searching. Did you ever feel like that? The question was a direct hit. Clara had spent years feeling like she was playing the part of the straight best friend, a role that chafed against the truth of her soul. All the time, Clara confessed, the admission feeling momentous. I think a lot of people feel that way. It's easier to follow the map you're given than to draw your own. I don't want to follow the map anymore, Maya whispered, and it sounded like a vow. I want to throw it away. The physical intimacy between them escalated in tandem with their emotional vulnerability. It was a slow, tentative dance of discovery. It started with small things. Maya's knee would press against Clara's as they sat on the couch, and instead of moving away, it would stay there, a warm, solid point of contact that sent shivers through Clara's entire body. While cooking, Maya would stand closer than necessary, her arm brushing against Clara's as she reached for the salt, the contact lingering for a heartbeat too long. One evening, they were watching an old black-and-white film. A stray strand of hair fell across Clara's face, and before she could push it away, Maya's fingers were there, impossibly gentle, tucking it behind her ear. Her fingertips grazed Clara's temple, and the touch was like a brand, a soft, searing heat that made Clara's breath catch. Maya's hand lingered for a moment, her thumb stroking Clara's cheekbone just once before pulling away. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, as if she was as surprised by her own action as Clara was. Clara's senses were heightened to an almost painful degree. She became exquisitely aware of Maya in every moment. The scent of her shampoo, a mix of vanilla and sandalwood, when she walked past. The soft, humming sound she made when she was painting. The exact shade of green in her eyes when the morning light hit them. Her world, which had once been a wide, sprawling landscape, had now shrunk to the size of their apartment, to the space of the sofa, to the inches that separated her body from Maya's. She lived in a constant state of agonizing hope. Every touch, every whispered late-night confession, was a piece of evidence she collected, proof that she was not insane, that this was real. But the fear was always there, a cold shadow at the edge of her joy. What if she was misreading everything? What if this was just Maya's way of processing her confusion about Mark, and Clara was just a convenient, safe person to lean on? The thought was a constant threat, a promise of a heartbreak that would be utterly unsurvivable. One afternoon, Clara was reading on the armchair when Maya emerged from her studio, her hands and face smudged with charcoal. She looked beautiful, elemental, her usual polished charisma replaced with the raw, focused energy of her art. She walked over to where Clara was sitting and, without a word, knelt on the floor, resting her head in Clara's lap. Clara froze, the book forgotten in her hands. Maya's hair was soft against her thighs. Her body was warm and pliant. It was an act of such profound, trusting intimacy that it made Clara's heart ache. Tentatively, Clara lifted a hand and began to run her fingers through Maya's thick, dark hair. Maya sighed, a sound of pure contentment, and seemed to melt into her touch. They stayed like that for a long time in silence. The only sounds were the turning of the book's pages as Clara pretended to read and the soft, even rhythm of Maya's breathing. In that moment, with the weight of Maya's head in her lap and her fingers tangled in her hair, Clara felt a sense of rightness so absolute it was terrifying. This was home. This was where she was meant to be. The fear was still there, but for the first time, the hope was stronger. The hope that this was not an ending, but the beginning of a new map, one they would draw together. Clara started noticing the small things, the moments of unguarded realization that flickered across Maya's face. She would catch Maya staring at her when she thought Clara was not looking, her expression a complex tapestry of wonder and confusion. Several times during their conversations, Clara would see Maya's gaze drop, just for a fraction of a second, to her lips. The first time it happened, Clara's heart had leaped into her throat, and she had stumbled over her words, her train of thought completely derailed. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture, but it was a crack in the dam of their friendship, a sign of the pressure building beneath the surface. The breakup with Mark, when it finally happened, was not dramatic. It was quiet and inevitable, a fizzle rather than an explosion. Maya came home one evening, her face pale, but her eyes clear. She dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and announced, "It's over. I ended it." Clara's first instinct was a surge of triumphant relief, so powerful it made her feel dizzy. She immediately suppressed it, replacing it with the carefully rehearsed expression of a concerned friend. "Oh, Maya. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Maya walked over to the couch and sank into it, looking not heartbroken, but unburdened. I'm okay, she said, testing the word. It was surprisingly easy. We both knew it was over. We just hadn't admitted it yet. She looked up at Clara, a small, sad smile on her face. The weirdest part? I don't feel sad. I feel nothing. Just empty. Is that horrible? No, Clara said, sitting down beside her, leaving a careful few inches of space between them. It's not horrible. It just means it was the right thing to do. He asked me if there was someone else, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. She was staring at her hands, which were twisting in her lap. Clara's blood ran cold. What did you say? I said no, Maya answered quickly. Because there isn't. Not in that way. She finally looked at Clara, and her eyes were filled with a desperate, pleading confusion. I think the problem wasn't just him, Clara. I think the problem is me. I've been happier on this couch with you these last few weeks than I have been with him in years. What does that mean? The question was a live wire, and Clara was terrified to touch it. This was the point of no return. They were standing on the precipice, and the next few words could either send them soaring or tumbling into the abyss. It means you value our friendship, Clara said, her voice betraying none of the turmoil inside her. She was still offering the out, the safe answer. Her own fear was a powerful censor. But Maya was not taking the easy way out anymore. She shook her head, her frustration evident. No, it's more than that. You know it is, her voice cracked with emotion. I feel things with you that I've never felt with anyone. Safe. Seen. I can breathe with you, she reached out, her hand hovering in the air between them for a moment before she seemed to make a decision. She placed her palm flat against Clara's cheek, her touch feather-light and yet grounding. Her thumb stroked the curve of Clara's jaw. I've been thinking about what it would be like to kiss you. The confession landed in the quiet room, and the world stopped. Clara's breath hitched. Electricity, pure and potent, flooded her veins. Maya's face was inches from hers, her hazel eyes dark with a mixture of fear and desire. This was everything Clara had ever wanted, and it was more terrifying than anything she had ever known. Her survival instincts, honed by years of self-denial, kicked in. The fear of this being a fleeting moment of post-breakup confusion was overwhelming. The fear of getting hurt, of losing Maya entirely, was a cold, paralyzing wave. She flinched, pulling back slightly, just enough to break the spell. The loss of Maya's touch was an immediate, physical ache. Maya's hand dropped, and a flicker of hurt crossed her features before being replaced by more confusion. Clara, you just broke up with your boyfriend, Clara said, her voice strained. You're emotional. You don't know what you're saying. She was protecting herself, but it felt like she was stabbing them both in the heart. Don't do that, Maya said, her voice sharp with sudden anger. Don't you dare tell me what I'm feeling. For the first time in my life, I'm actually trying to be honest, and you're shutting me down. The raw pain in Maya's voice cut through Clara's fear. She was right. Clara was being a coward. She had spent years wishing for this honesty, and now that it was here, she was trying to run from it. But the damage was done. A new, awkward tension had settled between them. The easy intimacy of the past few weeks had been shattered by the weight of Maya's near confession and Clara's reflexive retreat. For the next few days, they moved around each other like ghosts in their own home. The late-night talk stopped. They ate their meals in silence. Clara felt like she was suffocating, the unspoken things between them sucking all the oxygen from the air. She had pushed Maya away at the most critical moment, and she did not know how to fix it. The confrontation came a week later. Clara was in the kitchen, washing dishes, her back to the living room. She was so lost in her own miserable thoughts that she did not hear Maya come up behind her. We need to talk. Clara jumped, dropping a plate into the soapy water with a clatter. She turned around slowly, her heart pounding. Maya was standing there, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression determined. She looked like she had not slept in days. Neither had Clara. Okay, Clara said, her voice small. You've been hiding from me for a week, and I want to know why, Maya said, her tone leaving no room for evasion. There was no anger left, only a deep, weary sadness. I finally get the courage to say something real, to tell you something terrifying and true, and you looked at me like I was crazy. You pushed me away. Why? Clara leaned back against the counter, her strength failing her. She could not do this anymore. She could not lie, not to Maya, not to herself. The truth was a wild animal clawing at the inside of her throat, demanding to be set free. Because it's not fair, Clara whispered, tears welling in her eyes. It's not fair for you to say things like that when you're vulnerable and confused. Not fair to who? You. Maya took a step closer. Or are you just scared? Of course I'm scared. Clara's voice rose, cracking with the force of her pent-up emotions. You think I'm not scared? Maya, you have no idea. Then tell me. Maya insisted, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Help me understand. What aren't you telling me, Clara? What have you been hiding this whole time? The direct question was a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for years. The truth was there on the tip of her tongue. It was the most dangerous, most precious thing she possessed. Giving it to Maya would mean giving her the power to utterly destroy her. But hiding it was already destroying her from the inside out. She looked at Maya, at the woman who was her entire world, at the face she knew better than her own. She saw the desperation, the confusion, the genuine, heartfelt plea for honesty. And she knew she could not hide anymore. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the kind you take before you plunge into icy water. Because I'm in love with you, Clara confessed, the words tumbling out in a torrent of whispered agony. I have been for 2 years, 4 months, and 25 days. Because hearing you talk about kissing me felt like a dream I've been having for an eternity suddenly coming true. And I was terrified that it wasn't real, that I was going to wake up. That's why I'm scared. That's what I haven't been telling you. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and shimmering. Clara's entire body trembled with the force of it. She had finally said it. She had laid her heart, bruised and bleeding, at Maya's feet. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact of rejection, for the sound of her world shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Clara had ever heard. It stretched for an eternity, each second a new kind of torture. She waited for the pity, the awkward apology, the sound of Maya backing away. But it never came. Instead, she felt a gentle touch on her arm. She opened her eyes. Maya had moved closer, so close that Clara could see the individual flecks of gold in her wide, stunned eyes. The expression on Maya's face was not pity. It was not disgust or shock. It was something else entirely. It was a dawning, breathtaking, heart-stopping wave of pure understanding. It was as if Clara had just handed her the last, missing piece of a puzzle she had been trying to solve her entire life. Oh, Maya breathed, the word a soft puff of air. Oh, Clara. Tears began to spill down Clara's cheeks, hot and silent. She had done it. She had ruined everything. Their friendship, their home, this beautiful, fragile thing they had built. It was all over. But then Maya's other hand came up, cupping Clara's face, her thumbs gently wiping away the tears. Her touch was firm, certain. Don't cry, she whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. I'm sorry, Clara choked out. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have. No, Maya interrupted, her voice gaining strength. Don't be sorry. I'm the one who should be sorry. For being so blind. For not seeing it, she let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a sob. 2 years, she whispered, her eyes searching Clara's. You felt this for 2 years? Clara could only nod, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Maya shook her head in wonder, a slow, disbelieving motion. I think, she began, her voice dropping to a murmur, as if she were speaking a secret she was only just learning herself. I think I've been too. I didn't know what it was called. It was this giant, overwhelming feeling that I just labeled friendship because I didn't have another box to put it in. But it was never just that. It was always more. The world, which had stopped spinning, slowly started to turn again. But it was a new world now, remade by their confessions. The air was thin, electric. Clara could feel the warmth of Maya's palms against her skin, the gentle pressure of her thumbs. She could see the reflection of her own tear-streaked face in Maya's wide, luminous pupils. Every time I was with Mark, Maya continued, her voice gaining a new clarity, a new conviction. I felt this pull. This constant, nagging feeling that I was in the wrong place. I thought it was just me, that I was broken, that I couldn't be happy. But it wasn't that I was in the wrong place. I was just with the wrong person. Her gaze was intense, unwavering. The right person was right here the whole time, listening to me complain about a man I was only with because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. Hope, fierce and blinding, surged through Clara, chasing away the shadows of her fear. This was real. This was happening. Maya's gaze, which had been locked with Clara's, flickered down to her lips. It was not a fleeting glance this time. It was deliberate. It was a question. When her eyes lifted back to Clara's, the question was there, too, shining and vulnerable. "Clara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Can I kiss you?" The question was a courtesy. The answer was already in Clara's eyes, in the way she leaned forward, in the soft, hitching sound of her breath. But the act of asking was a gift, an acknowledgement of the years of silence, of the monumental step they were about to take. "Yes," Clara breathed, the word a prayer she had been holding in for an eternity. The space between them dissolved. Maya's lips met hers, and it was not a tentative, questioning touch. It was a collision of certainty, a confirmation of a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for years. It was soft and desperate and unbelievably gentle all at once. Maya tasted of salt from her own tears and something else, something that was uniquely her, a flavor Clara knew she would spend the rest of her life trying to name. It was a kiss that rewrote history. Every friendly hug, every shared laugh, every late-night conversation was recontextualized in this single moment, every platonic gesture suddenly imbued with the romantic longing that had been simmering just beneath the surface. Clara's hands came up to clutch at Maya's shirt, anchoring herself to this new reality. Maya's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against her body, leaving no space for doubt, no room for fear. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent as years of suppressed emotion poured into it. It was a conversation without words, a story of longing and discovery, of fear and finally, of homecoming. It was the relief of a breath finally released, the feeling of a key sliding into a lock, the quiet, profound click of two pieces fitting perfectly together. When they finally pulled apart, it was only for air. They rested their foreheads together, their breath mingling, their hearts beating a frantic, synchronized rhythm. Clara's eyes were still closed, but she could feel Maya's smile against her skin. "Oh," Maya whispered, her voice filled with a breathless wonder. "Wow," Clara managed to reply, her own voice shaky. Maya pulled back just enough to look at her, her hands still framing Clara's face as if she were a precious, fragile work of art. Her eyes were shining, clear, and utterly certain. "That felt," she started, searching for the word. "Right," Clara finished for her, the word a perfect, solid truth. "So right," Maya agreed, a grin spreading across her face, the first truly, uncomplicatedly happy expression Clara had seen on her in months. It was like watching the sunrise. "I think I might be a little bit in love with you, Clara." Clara let out a laugh that was half sob, half joy. "Yeah?" she asked, her own smile feeling wide enough to split her face. "Well, I'm a lot in love with you." And then Maya was kissing her again, and this time there was no desperation, no years of pent-up longing. There was only joy. Pure, unadulterated, terrifying, beautiful joy. It was the first kiss of the rest of their lives. In the immediate aftermath of the kiss, a new kind of silence descended, but this one was not tense or awkward. It was soft and filled with wonder, the quiet hum of a world irrevocably changed. They stood in the kitchen, wrapped in each other's arms, as if afraid that letting go would make the moment disappear. Clara could feel the steady beat of Maya's heart against her chest, a rhythm that was quickly becoming her new favorite sound. "I'm scared," Maya whispered against her hair, her voice muffled but clear. The admission was a stark contrast to the joy that had just passed between them. Clara pulled back slightly to look at her, her hands sliding from Maya's shoulders to rest on her arms. Me too, she confessed, her own fear resurfacing, not as a paralyzing wave, but as a manageable tremor. I'm terrified. What does this mean? Maya asked, her eyes wide with the enormity of it all. What do we do now? The questions were huge, daunting. They involved Mark, their families, their friends, the entire structure of the lives they had known. But looking at Maya's face, at the raw hope mingling with her fear, Clara felt a surprising sense of calm settle over her. I don't know, she answered honestly, a small smile touching her lips. But for the first time, I feel like we're going to figure it out together. The word together felt new and solid, a promise of a shared future. They migrated back to the couch, their natural habitat, but this time they sat with no space between them. Maya's leg was pressed against hers, her head was on Clara's shoulder, and their fingers were intertwined, a comfortable, solid knot. The air was different. The unspoken had finally been spoken, and the relief was palpable. It all makes sense now, Maya said after a long, comfortable silence. She shifted, turning to face Clara more fully. All this time, I was complaining about Mark. He wasn't attentive enough, he didn't listen, he didn't understand the things that were important to me. She looked down at their joined hands, a look of dawning realization on her face. I was measuring him against you. The whole time. I was measuring every relationship I've ever had against what I have with you, and they all came up short. Of course they did. It was an impossible standard. The confession was a balm on the old, tender wounds of Clara's heart. The years she had spent feeling invisible, feeling like the consolation prize, were suddenly reframed. She had not been the ghost in Maya's story, she had been the benchmark. The quiet, constant standard against which all others were judged and found wanting. I just thought, that's what love was, Maya continued, her voice filled with a soft regret. That it was supposed to be a little disappointing. That you had to compromise on the deep connection stuff to get the stability, the normal life. She met Clara's eyes, her own shining with a new, profound understanding. I was wrong. I was looking for the wrong things in all the wrong people. The thing I was actually looking for, it was right here. It was you. Clara's heart swelled with a feeling so immense she thought it might burst. I was always right here, she whispered, her voice thick. And I was always yours. I know, Maya said, her voice equally thick. I think a part of me has always known that too. They talked for hours, unraveling the past, re-examining their history through this new lens. They talked about the first time they met, about moments of connection that now seemed laden with unspoken romance. They talked about their fears of what people would say, of navigating this new identity for Maya, of the possibility of messing this up because it mattered more than anything had ever mattered before. We just take it one day at a time, Clara said, repeating the advice she had given to so many friends about so many other relationships. But this time, the words felt true and full of hope. We just try this. Us. Us, Maya repeated, testing the word. It sounded like home. I like that. I really, really like that. She leaned in and kissed Clara again, softly this time, a gentle press of lips that was a promise, a seal on their new beginning. It was not a kiss of frantic discovery, but one of quiet, joyful confirmation. They were here. They were real. They were theirs. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, they were facing it on the same side, holding hands, ready for whatever came next. 3 months later, the world had settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. The initial terror and euphoria had softened into a comfortable, profound intimacy that permeated every corner of their apartment and their lives. The fear had not vanished entirely, but it had been relegated to a quiet corner, easily silenced by a shared glance, a quick kiss in the kitchen, or the simple, grounding act of holding hands. It was a Saturday morning in late autumn. Sunlight, the color of pale honey, streamed through the living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The apartment smelled of coffee and cinnamon, a scent Clara now associated with pure, unadulterated happiness. She was sitting on the floor, leaning against the sofa, a book open in her lap, but her attention focused elsewhere. Maya was across the room, working on a new canvas. She was wearing one of Clara's old, paint-splattered sweaters. Her dark hair was piled in a messy bun on top of her head, and she had a smudge of brilliant blue paint on her cheek. She hummed softly as she worked, a tuneless, contented sound. Watching her, Clara felt a wave of love so powerful it was almost dizzying. It was a feeling that still ambushed her at the most mundane moments, a sudden, overwhelming gratitude that this was her life now. The conversation with Mark had been a footnote, a quiet, civil phone call that had ended with mutual, if slightly confused, well wishes. Coming out to their friends and families had been a series of conversations, some easier than others, but they had faced each one together, a united front. The world had not ended. In fact, it had opened up, becoming wider and more vibrant than Clara had ever imagined possible. They had discovered a new normal, a life that felt more authentic and joyful than the one they had been living before. Maya set down her brush and stretched, her back arching like a cat's. She turned and her eyes met Clara's across the room. A slow, easy smile spread across her face, the kind of smile that was reserved just for Clara. It was a smile that reached all the way to her eyes, making the flecks of gold and green dance. "What are you staring at?" Maya asked, her voice warm and teasing. "Just you," Clara answered simply, no trace of her old fear or hesitation in her voice. "I'm just looking at you." Maya walked over, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She sat down in front of Clara, tucking her legs beneath her. She reached out and gently took the book from Clara's hands, setting it aside. Then she took Clara's hands in her own, her fingers, cool from the morning air, lacing through Clara's. "Is that okay?" Maya asked, her expression turning serious. "Does it ever feel, I don't know, like I took too long? Like you wasted all that time waiting for me to figure things out?" The question was tinged with a familiar note of regret, the only shadow that sometimes flickered between them. Clara brought their joined hands to her lips, pressing a soft kiss to Maya's knuckles. "No," she said, her voice firm and certain. "It wasn't waiting. It was just loving you. There was no timeline. And anyway, it led us here." She squeezed Maya's hands. "And here is perfect. Here is exactly where we were always supposed to be." Maya's eyes softened, the last of the shadow receding. "Good," she whispered. "Then we're both exactly where we need to be." She leaned forward, closing the small space between them, and kissed her. It was a simple, everyday kind of kiss, familiar and comforting, yet it still sent a spark of electricity through Clara's veins. It was the kiss of a Saturday morning, the promise of a lazy afternoon, the quiet affirmation of a love that had been patient enough to wait for its moment to bloom. As Maya pulled away, her thumb gently stroked Clara's cheek, right where the smudge of blue paint had transferred from her own skin. Clara did not wipe it away. She looked at the woman in front of her, her best friend, her partner, her home, and she understood. She understood that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are not the ones that begin with a lightning strike, but the ones that smolder quietly for years, waiting for a single, brave question to fan them into a brilliant, life-altering flame.